A World Cup that sold more than 5 million tickets, a tournament spread across 16 cities in 3 countries, and yet, in hotel after hotel, the lights are on, the rooms are made up, and almost nobody is checking in. That's the strange contradiction sitting at the center of the 2026 World Cup right now. Tickets are flying, rooms are sitting empty. So how do both of those things happen at the same time? Stick with me, because the answer says a lot about how fans actually behave in 2026, and it might change how you think about the biggest events in sports. Let's start with what's actually happening on the ground. According to the American Hotel and Lodging Association, nearly 80% of hotels across host markets reported bookings running below what they had projected. In Kansas City, that number jumped to somewhere between 85 and 90%. This isn't a vague feeling. It's measured, city by city, room by room. Part of the story traces back to FIFA itself. Earlier this year, FIFA had block-booked thousands of rooms across host cities, the kind of mass reservation that organizers usually make to guarantee inventory for teams, media, and sponsors. Then, in the months leading up to kickoff, large chunks of those blocks were released or canceled. In Philadelphia, more than 2,000 rooms were canceled. In Vancouver, the number was even more dramatic, with somewhere between 70 and 80% of FIFA's room blocks released, adding up to roughly 15,000 rooms a night. Vancouver alone is now projecting a shortfall of around 70,000 accommodation nights. Here's where things get interesting. Hotels say those early bookings shaped everything: staffing plans, pricing strategy, investment decisions. When FIFA pulled back, it left a gap that local hotels weren't prepared for. FIFA's response has been straightforward. The organization says all room releases followed agreed timelines with hotel partners, and that in many cases, rooms were released ahead of schedule, specifically to help hotels resell them. 2 very different reads on the same set of numbers. But that's only part of the story. Because alongside the hotel picture, there's a second trend reshaping this tournament: how fans are actually deciding where and when to travel. This matters because the 2026 World Cup isn't built like past tournaments. It's spread across 3 countries in 16 cities, which means a fan's plans can shift completely depending on which team wins a group, which city hosts a knockout match, and how far they're willing to travel on short notice. Industry analysts have a name for this shift. They're calling it a rate event rather than an occupancy event. In plain terms, hotels aren't necessarily seeing massive swings in how full they are. They're seeing fans wait longer to book, then pay a premium for whatever's left once they know exactly which match they're attending. Now, this is where it gets even more specific. Data from CoStar shows hotel booking rates on match days have been noticeably lower in several U.S. cities compared to host cities in Mexico. On one mid-June match day, New York's booking rate sat around 57%. Meanwhile, Monterrey hit 60%, Mexico City climbed past 60%, and Guadalajara topped 70% on its match day. Think about it. 3 host countries, 1 tournament, and very different booking behavior depending on which side of the border you're looking at. Part of that gap comes down to access. Analysts point out that international fans from countries with more restrictive U.S. entry requirements may simply find it easier to travel into Canada or Mexico instead. Miami is something of an exception here, benefiting from its existing connections across Latin America and the Caribbean.
So why the disconnect between strong ticket sales and soft hotel numbers? This is the bigger issue. Fans today aren't booking trips the way they used to for major tournaments. They're tracking ticket prices in real time. They're comparing flight costs across multiple platforms. And increasingly, they're waiting until they actually know their match schedule before locking in a place to stay. One England supporter, traveling to his 4th World Cup, described his group's strategy plainly: a budget of around $75 per person per night, renting a car, and staying anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour outside the host city center. Mix in a hotel some nights, an Airbnb on others, and stretch the budget across the whole trip. That kind of planning used to be the exception. At this World Cup, it's becoming closer to the norm. And it's reshaping where the money actually goes. Short-term rentals are outpacing traditional hotels in several host city markets. Families and groups who make up a large share of World Cup travelers are gravitating toward shared rentals precisely because they offer more flexibility and lower per-person costs than a single hotel room downtown. Let's bring this back to the fan experience itself, because that's ultimately what all of this affects. Inside the stadiums, the picture has been uneven. Marquee matches involving major footballing nations have delivered exactly what you'd expect: full stands, loud atmospheres, sold-out hospitality sections. Lower-profile group stage fixtures in larger stadiums have told a different story, with visible gaps in upper tiers during broadcasts. For fans actually attending, the experience still depends heavily on which match they chose. A neutral group stage game in a half-empty section feels nothing like a knockout match with two passionate fan bases packed into the same building. There's also a quieter shift happening behind the scenes. Some accommodation owners have spoken about months of uncertainty leading into the tournament. One boutique hotel near a host stadium reported occupancy sitting around 45% for the tournament period, down from roughly 70% at the same point the previous year. She pointed to a mix of factors shaping that drop: rising travel costs, broader economic pressures, and above all, ticket prices that climbed far beyond what many fans expected when these host cities first won their bids. So what happens next? This is where the story is still being written. Hospitality analysts are largely betting on the knockout rounds to shift the numbers. Once teams with massive global fan bases like Brazil, Argentina, England, France, and Spain advance deep into the tournament, demand for those specific matches and cities tends to spike. Fans of advancing nations often make rapid, late-stage travel decisions once they know their team is still alive. There's real precedent for that kind of late surge. Data tracking attendance at recent marquee soccer events found that a much higher share of fans traveled long distances for a high-profile final compared to a regular exhibition match. People clearly are willing to travel far for the biggest games. They just want certainty before they commit. The best-case scenario for host cities is a wave of last-minute bookings tied to deep tournament runs, especially from countries with large mobile fan bases. The more realistic scenario, according to most hospitality data so far, is a patchwork outcome. Some cities and some matches will overperform. Others, particularly neutral group stage fixtures in oversized venues, may continue to undersell relative to original projections. Would this affect your excitement for the World Cup if you were planning a trip? Knowing rooms might come at a discount the longer you wait, but matches might also sell out the moment a big team advances? Here's the bigger picture worth sitting with. This tournament was always going to be massive in scale, in ticket revenue, in global television audiences. None of that is really in question. But the on-the-ground experience in host cities looks more complicated than the early hype suggested, and it's exposing something real about how modern fans plan, spend, and travel for the events they care about most. So where does this leave host cities for the remainder of the tournament? Likely watching the knockout bracket as closely as any fan, because the teams that survive may end up deciding which cities see the rebound they were promised, and which ones are left holding rooms nobody came to fill. Which country's fan base do you think shows up the strongest if their team goes deep into the knockout rounds? Drop your prediction in the comments and let me know if any of these numbers surprised you. If you're enjoying this kind of grounded, data-first look at World Cup 2026, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. This story is still developing, and as always, football never stays quiet for long. See you in the next one.